work career was entirely in the state and federal government service until he retired in 2017. He still comes back to Chinatown to participate in cultural as well as athletic events, but also likes to give back doing community service. And so he resides now in Silver Spring, Maryland with his wife, Penny, and two sons, Kevin and Jason. So I would like to hand this over to Jack.
Thank you, Jen and Michelle. I'm really greatly honored to be the moderator today because we have some amazing panelists. So let me introduce them briefly, and then we'll get on with the program. The first one is Regina Chow-McPhie. Regina had an extensive career in civil rights law and civil service. She worked at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission for 29 years, as well as FEMA and SSA. She was born and raised in Washington, D.C. of parents who immigrated here from Toisan, China. She attended Washington, D.C. public schools in the 60s. And in the 60s, Regina met Dr. Martin Luther King at Shaw Junior High. Amazing. On Sundays, she attended the Chinese community church with her family and then spent time in Chinatown socializing and networking. In her youth, she was also a member of the Eastern Wind organization, also based in Chinatown, whose mission was to promote the rights of Chinese Americans in Chinatown, to bring awareness of the social and economic needs of the Chinatown residents and the wider district's AAPI community. Regina graduated from the University of Pittsburgh with a bachelor's degree in urban planning. Regina is currently retired and enjoying the 1882 Foundation's Talk Story programs and gardening. Our second panelist is Ben Guzman. He is the director of the Mayor's Office of Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs. He has been a leading voice at the local and national level on issues of racial equity, immigrants' rights, veterans affairs, and LGBT justice for 20 years. He comes to MOAPIA from the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ Affairs, where he served as the community outreach specialist. During his tenure there, he helped execute two major first-time events for the office: the District of Pride LGBTQ Culture Performance event and the 32nd annual 17th Street High Heel Race, presented by the Mayor's Office as the lead organizer. He also served as both the Public Information Officer and the Americans with Disabilities Act compliance officers for the agency. Our third panelist is Christina Wong Poy. She was appointed by Governor Larry Hogan in 2015 to serve as the Administrative Director of both the Governor's Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs and the Governor's Commission on South Asian American Affairs, which are part of the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives. Before joining the Hogan administration, her professional career and volunteer activities were grounded in improving educational, leadership, and social access for minority, low-income students. Her career history includes positions as the Global Ambassador and Director of Scholar Relations for the GatesScholars.com think tank and the Global Community, which was founded by the alumni of the Gates Millennium Scholars Program, and as a Senior Relationship Manager of the Gates Millennium Scholars Program from 2000 to 2014. She credits her experience as the OCA, Organization of Chinese American Women's National Vice President of Communications for 8 years, her 2 terms as President of OCAW-Maryland Chapter, and her 2 terms as the Treasurer of the Organization of Chinese American Young Professionals, with providing her leadership and community engagement platforms. Christina received her BA in East Asian Language, Literature, as well as certificates in East Asian Studies and Business from the University of Maryland. Wow. So first, I would like to open up the questioning a little bit about, excuse me for 1 second, I'm sorry. I would like to open up the questioning to our panelists. And the opening question for me is always, why the month of May? Why is AAPI celebrated in the month of May? And since it was a kind of a federal mandate, I wanted to ask Regina, what happens in the federal agencies?
Hi. So, well, I would say in terms of why the month of May, May is an important month because on May 7th, 1843, it was to commemorate the arrival of the first Japanese immigrant to the US shores. And something that's dear to my heart is on May 10th, 1869, the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad was occurred at Promontory Point, Utah, of which there were 20,000 Chinese workers who participated in the building of that railroad. And from what I understand, my ancestors were among those Chinese workers. So your question about on the federal side, I recall I was at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in the 1980s when the week of May for the celebration of Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And our chairman was J. Clay Smith, who wanted to make EEOC the leader in celebrating this observance since no other agency did it. And we did it. We were the first ones, as I recall, to have an Asian American Pacific Islander celebration. So I worked on that. I was in the EEO office at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in Washington, D.C. headquarters. And I worked with Alicia Columna, Franklin Chow, and some other people, as well as with public affairs and other management officials to have the first EEOC program in Washington, D.C. And we wanted to set a precedent so other federal agencies would follow and start observing it. So as years went by, other federal agencies did have Asian American Pacific Islander programs. I was at the Social Security Administration in the 2000s, from about 2002, 2003 on. And I worked on the component I worked on, the Office of Disability Adjudication Review, which has the judges that judge the hearing cases, hears the cases on disability cases for SSA. So there were about 6,000 employees in that particular component of SSA, Social Security Administration, and we had celebrations in headquarters. And I was there when I wanted to have other parts of SSA to participate in it as well. Now, SSA headquarters had a celebration, and they were among the first agency to have big celebration for AAPI Heritage Month. And then you will see in the background I have here, at ODAR, we did have individual celebration for the various Heritage Month programs. And then at some point later on, because it was very time consuming having a program every month for various observances like Black History Month, Women's History Month, etc. We combined it. I worked with headquarters and I pushed it for us to have a diversity day where we combined the various celebrations. So the posters I have in the background are our Diversity Day program, and it was a big celebration. And then when I went to work for FEMA, I was with the Asian American Pacific Islander Employee Network, and FEMA was part of Homeland Security. And there was a general counsel who was a presidential appointee, Mr. Fong, who initiated the AAPI Employee Network. And we had a big celebration, HHS-wide, so that the various other components of Homeland Security would have celebrations. And we had a big Asian American Pacific Islander celebration in headquarters and had speakers like from the White House and so forth. So it's really exciting, and many federal agencies from that point on, after EEOC, had various celebrations.
Great. I'm a retired federal employee, and we have like programs maybe where we have a potluck, But I'm curious, in the early days, what kind of programs did you have? Was it mostly, bringing food in? Was it having cultural activities? Do you recall?
Yes, what I found in common for a lot of, because I connected being in the Equal Employment Opportunity Office and going to some of those conferences, I talked with other people, and generally, they generally want it to be informative. So they would usually bring in a keynote speaker, at least one, and have a speaker come and give good information. Some talked about Asian American Pacific Island history, but they try to make it relevant to the agency. That's one thing we try to do at ODAR, was we would try to have speakers who could educate our judges and our people about the very important cultural information for them to understand. For instance, for Asian American Pacific Islanders, it was important for them to understand some of our cultural nuances, so that when they have hearings, they will realize that, for instance, the claimant is not being disrespectful by not looking at him straight in the eyes, or being humble and quiet. They to not misinterpret. We were trying to educate them. So I noticed that in federal agencies as well. When we at FEMA, we had the first one. I pushed to have the first AAPI program at FEMA, and we had one of our SESs. I didn't know he existed, but I had to reach out to the only Asian American SES, Senior Executive Service employee at FEMA, to be our keynote speaker, to tell everyone we do have someone who's up in the ranks. And he gave a presentation about unconscious bias, but it was to educate all of FEMA, because we deal with people in disaster. So what I realized is that each federal agency would try to usually bring in speakers. They would appropriate money to bring in speakers, so that they could give information to educate their workforce. And then afterwards, some would have nice elaborate luncheon spreads. And Chinatown benefited, because many agencies would order from Chinatown restaurants and pick up the food. We get a big spread and have it out. And then some of them we didn't have money for, so some of us volunteered and brought it in. And I personally come out of pocket to work with other employee groups and just bring in food to share and give people a sampling. So we had music, we had displays, we came up with posters, and generally that's how I found the federal agencies I participated in, other federal agencies celebrated this observance.
No, that's great. And it's especially great to hear that you had SESers that supported. You need, the SESers, the directors, to support in the federal. But that leads me to the district and to Ben, because, the mayor seems very proactive, very, open to, the Asian Pacific Islanders affairs. So Ben, could you talk to what the mayor's office has done in the district, and maybe what kind of programs and how they celebrate in the district?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, first of all, I always say this as a point of pride, but we are talking to kind of our counterpart agencies, offices of Asian and Pacific Islander affairs in other jurisdictions, right? Local governments in California, in Minnesota, in Washington State. And as far as we found, we are actually the largest of our kind in the country. So I've always, have found some measure of pride in that. As much love as I have for all of our Californians and our Minnesotans and our Washingtonians on the West Coast, our office is the largest. And so on some level, it reflects the interest that our city government has in promoting diversity. We have a robust Office of Community Affairs. So many of my counterpart agencies are also the largest of their kind in the country, whether it's the Office of LGBTQ Affairs, where I came from before I was here at MOAPIA, or the Office of Veterans Affairs, Office of Latino Affairs, and, obviously it's not as if these other cities and states don't care about these constituencies, and they set up, their outreach and engagement efforts in different ways. but nevertheless, it remains a point of pride for me, I would say. Our office started in the 80s. We had a staff person who had started out at Latino Affairs, but who happened to be Chinese American. Someone, an expat from Los Angeles, Marshall Wong, who some folks may remember here, whom I knew as he was getting ready to leave DC when I was first moving here in the 90s. But he was the first person who staffed what ultimately became this office that I'm now sitting in. But you know, we've been doing this work in terms of building community in the Asian Pacific Islander community in Washington, D.C. since the 80s. Our commission is actually celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. But in terms of Heritage Month, you know, it's hard for me to talk about sort of how previous mayors have done it. I'm most familiar, obviously, with how my boss has been doing it. Ironically enough, the first year that she was in office, the office has historically, since I would say since about 2000, has given out a community service award, right? And so the year that Mayor Bowser first took office, the commission actually gave the award to me in 2015. And now I end up working here. And my commission chair, John Tinpei, won the Volunteer Service Award, and now he is the chair of our commission. But that event, the event where we received that award back in 2015, is the marquee event historically that the mayor's office has put on to celebrate Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, right? For the last couple of years, obviously not last year or this year, we've done it virtually since the public health emergency. But the last couple of years, we've been doing it at DC's historic Lincoln Theater in the U Street corridor. But yeah, no, so we've been able to put a high profile, I would say, as much as we can in terms of celebrating the Asian and Pacific Islander community during Heritage Month. I mean, I'll stop there for now. You know,
No,
there's more to
that's great, 'cause
say, but that's kind of the initial.
Yeah, no, I was able to attend a couple of those events at the Lincoln Theater, and what I really loved was that it diversified the Asians. It wasn't just about the Chinese or the Koreans or the Filipinos. It was a broad-based Asian spectrum, and it was a wonderful program. You know, usually we only see the mayor at Chinese New Year's. You know, she comes and gives a speech and so forth. But it's nice to see that she has, you know, included, you know, your office and to do more events, you know, and to support the Washington, D.C. Chinatown area. That's great. That's really great. So, but I want to now transition to the state of Maryland with Christina, because I've lived in Maryland now for maybe 30 years or so. I would love to know, you know, at least during the tenure of where you've been there, Christina, what does Maryland do, the state of Maryland, how do they celebrate AAPI?
Sure. Well, I wanted to preface it by saying that I used to work for the federal government. And when I worked for the federal government agency, we used to celebrate APA Heritage Month, just as Regina was describing, with a keynote speaker who was speaking on a subject that would be related to the agency and have a relationship and significance to that. So that's one. Two, having been an employee in DC, I also attended some of the DC celebrations. So I'm familiar with those as well, and continue to support them as a fellow, you know, DC metropolitan area resident. So our commissioners on the Governor's Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs and Governor's Commission on South Asian American Affairs, our commissioners, along with myself, we also support some of the events in DC and go down and, you know, see our brothers and sisters and cousins there too as well. And we always welcome everybody in DC and Virginia to celebrate at our events as well. So I just want to mention that. One other thing I wanted to mention is that what I always find interesting is that we talk about celebrating Asian Pacific American Heritage Month on the federal level. I don't know how many people know that it actually started in Virginia first on a local level.
No,
So
did I
it
know
started,
that?
yeah, it actually started in Fairfax, Virginia. So I don't know if you're familiar with Jeannie Ju. She was a congressional staffer. So on the Hill, she had gone around knocking on doors, and along with Congressman Frank Horton's administrative assistant at the time, Ruby Moy, they helped May become celebrated nationally for the entire month. But it actually started in Virginia, in Fairfax, where Jeannie resided, and she went to the Fairfax County Council. And it started with acknowledgement observance there. I think it was Asian Pacific American Heritage Week, not month at the time. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. It actually started a year before it went national. But Maryland, what we do is we have our own big celebration. We just had ours May 7th. Sometimes we'll have it in Annapolis. Our First Lady is the first Asian Pacific American First Lady of Maryland. She's also the first Korean American First Lady of the United States. So she is, of course, likes to be involved, and she's usually, she comes to the Annapolis event, and she comes and speaks and, you know, eats and mixes and mingles with the constituents and everything, and which is really nice. And we have cultural performances, we have demonstrations, we have display tables, we have our Maryland sister states who have relationships in Japan, in China, in Korea. They have display tables, and so they participate as well. And then we also support the different APA Heritage Month events throughout Maryland, whether they be community organizations, business organizations, universities. Just last week, I was speaking for the University of Maryland School of Nursing in Baltimore. And also last week was the Maryland Department of Transportation. They were having their annual observance. And so with today, you know, the hybrid, you know, virtual meetings that we have, or performances and things like that, it's all mostly videos that we're seeing. But, you know, when we're live, we have bands come in, we have performers, dancers, singers, martial artists, demonstrations, tea ceremonies. So, and now there's also a lot of affinity groups or resource groups that a lot of companies have. So that's also something that we get invited to participate in. I usually present the governor's proclamation for Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. So it's a very busy time of the year for me and our commissioners.
Thank you. No, it's great to know. You know, that brings a thought to, you know, when I grew up in Chinatown, I don't remember much about any kind of Asian, you know, American Pacific Islander, any kind of celebration. It was more geared into really my local Chinese community. So are there, or do you guys, and of course on the federal level, I know they won't do this, but, you know, does the district or does the state of Maryland, you know, try to help drive more of this AAPI celebrations, more of it, you know, trying to get as many groups involved as possible? You know, I don't know much about that kind of interaction. Is there that type of thing? Either Ben or Christina?
I would say yes. In fact, the Montgomery College in Rockville, their campus yesterday, their diversity inclusion office was putting on their Asian Pacific American Heritage Month observance. And they contacted me weeks ago about potential speakers. I ended up connecting them with 3 of their speakers yesterday that spoke yesterday. as well as having the First Lady of Maryland, Yumi Hogan, participate in a video message. And actually 2 of our commissioners from the Governor's Commission on Asian Pacific American Affairs were speakers, as well as a couple of others.
No, that's great. So Ben, let me ask you a question because, you know, and I'm going to connect this to Chinatown because that's where my history is, but is there more, or is there something that can help Chinatown celebrate AAPI? I know you do a lot of the programs like the movies and things, but, and maybe Chinese New Year's is always a big thing, but, you know, involving the residents, is that possible?
Well, you know, it's an interesting question, Jack, because I think on one hand, Chinatown is sort of the ancestral home of the AAPI community, right? I mean, it has a lot of history. As you note, the Lunar New Year parade happens there every year. I mean, Chinese aren't the only folks that celebrate Lunar New Year, though, right? And so, you know, as we celebrate Lunar New Year, you know, we all end up in Chinatown, and hopefully we'll all end up there, you know, next year. But our efforts are always focused on expanding the dialogue to be as inclusive as possible of the entire kind of AAPI umbrella, right? And so, you know, so our proclamation from the mayor always mentions the fact that, you know, 1 billion people across the world, you know, from China to Vietnam to Korea celebrate Lunar New Year, right? But Chinatown, I think, has evolved in a lot of ways. I mean, you know, some ways good, some ways, you know, people have their own opinions about how Chinatown has evolved over the years. But from our perspective, you know, while at the same time as we honor the history of Chinatown and all of the, you know, families that have come through and continue to take part, and the community church that continues to be, you know, an institution here. We just had a faith and vaccinations clinic at the Chinatown Community Church, right? We also see it as the kind of locus for building kind of a new Asian America, you know, and so our events that we put on in Chinatown Community Park, in the park, for example, you know, we've tried to turn that from, you know, a place that kind of you just pass through, right, on your way out of town, and as you're driving on Massachusetts Avenue, just trying to get out of that part of the city, because it wasn't always the nicest part of the city. But now, you know, we've spent a lot of time making it, you know, part of a new way to celebrate the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, right? So the movies that you talk about that we hold there, the last movie night that we did, that was like a really big effort. We worked with the women's professional soccer team because we were showing the Indian movie Bend It Like Beckham, right? And so for us, while, you know, Chinatown is, you know, specifically has its roots in the Chinese American community, we sort of turn it into kind of the new articulation of an AAPI cultural identity, and bring in these different kinds of cultural ways to celebrate the community.
No, that's great. Regina, let me ask you this about federal agencies though, and I'm going to come to Christina on the same kind of question though. So, you know, most of the time, like Ben just mentioned, it does focus on the Chinese community because there's a Chinatown, there's a physical place.
I try to reach out to people in Chinatown to do some of the performance, but we didn't have enough funds to afford what was quoted to me. So at the Homeland Security headquarters celebration, I remember we got some students from an East Indian dance group that performed. And what was interesting also at another Homeland Security agency was we did have a Caribbean group perform, because there are Chinese people in the Caribbean. So we reached out, and they were high school students. They came and performed, and we would give them a token stipend for that. So I know what some agencies did is first getting to recognize the diversity of the Asian American, Hawaiian Native, Pacific Islander community, groups of people, and realizing there's so many different cultures in it. So when we have celebrations, each year we would focus on a particular group so that we can recognize the group, and that's part of educating the workforce. And we would, I would talk to the employee groups and get them to reach out to what entertain, so they could participate in entertainment, and also reach out for speakers. And so when Social Security Administration had a national combined diversity conference, each employee group were asked to nominate a speaker. And from the Asian group, I talked to the president of our group, and I remember there was a professor at Howard University, a Chinese guy who wrote a book. Unfortunately, I can't remember his name. I saw him at the conference, the Railroad Conference in Utah, but we got him to speak. What's his name?
Frank Wu at the law school?
Yes, yes. And he was a fascinating speaker when I saw him on TV talking to the law school at Howard University. So I pushed to get him nominated. And we had funding for speakers, so we were able to afford him. And he did come to our national conference, and he was one of the many speakers. And it was interesting, one of the Hispanic speakers talked about his connection with the Chinese community in Chinatown in New York City. And it was really interesting. Some of the speakers tried to relate with the other groups, and this Hispanic speaker talked about how he was in a gang in New York, but it was a Chinese woman, a little Chinese woman from Chinatown, who lived next to him and pulled him aside to say, "You were too smart. You must go finish school. You shouldn't be out here in the gangs. Go to school." And it was interesting. So he talked about that at a national conference, of how it's important for people to help each other, to reach out to each other. And he talked about this Chinese woman, and he had a soft spot for Chinese people from that point, because he was a gang member, and his life was so different. But this Chinese woman influenced him to go to school, to get educated. She helped him get scholarships and so forth, and he became a professional. So it's interesting how there's a connection and how we work with each other.
That's great. Actually, Ted, that sounds like a great talk story for the future. So I know with the pandemic, right, it's really hard to have on-site or type celebrations. I mean, as a federal employee, as a former federal employee, I know that it's very hard to get in. So for Christina, though, for the state of Maryland and the surrounding areas of Maryland, and I live in Montgomery County, so does the state ever consider, because there's no Chinatown that I know of in Maryland. There's the Eating Center in Virginia, which is kind of like a little enclave that people could celebrate. How does Maryland handle that? I mean, I know you talked a little bit about, you'll go to attend things, but like when you hold an event in, like, I think you mentioned Annapolis, but would you ever hold an event like in Wheaton? There's about 10 Chinese restaurants in Wheaton, I know. Talk about that. I mean, what do you think?
Sure.
Is that even possible?
Sure. What's interesting
It's
is
good timing with the picture in Tacoma Park. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There used to be a Chinatown in Baltimore. Not many people realize that. And there is a movement in Baltimore to revive that area of Chinatown. So that's one thing. Wanted to mention, with the evolution of the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month with the festivals and observances, it's brought more awareness to the diversity of Asian American Pacific Islander, culture, food, language, traditional costumes, because, as the other two speakers, Regina and Ben, have also mentioned, we're not homogeneous. We are different. We have very diverse backgrounds. So in the state of Maryland, we have over 310,000 Asian Pacific Americans. And that's spread out throughout the state. So it's not just Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Baltimore. Those are the places that people think of first, but also Howard County and Frederick County, Cecil County. I go up to the festivals up in Cecil County. That's, that's right across the way from, Pennsylvania and Delaware. But I go there and support it and present the governor's proclamation. We have a commissioner up there, and we have different performers go up and perform there. So we expand the acknowledgement of our different cultures in different areas of Maryland. So it's not just going to Annapolis. So there was one year we were in Cecil County, Montgomery County, and Frederick County, all in one weekend. And that was all with the commissioners, the state doing and helping to support all three of these programs in one weekend. That was a big challenge. So I think that's why we went back to having it in Annapolis years after that. But
no, that's great. That's great. So I noticed when we were just talking the other day, and this is to any of the panelists, that the designation has already changed this year. I think we've added Native Hawaiian to the group. Just out of curiosity, does that expand any of your type of demographic? I don't know how many expat Hawaiians live in the DMV area. It may not have any, but it looks like as part of it, it's, the AAPI community is evolving into add more. Is there any reach out to this type of thing? I don't know who's normally included.
that hasn't changed in Maryland because the Native Hawaiians were already included as Pacific
okay.
Islanders. So we actually have one of our commissioners who is Native Hawaiian.
Well, federals are a little bit behind, I guess.
Well, I think it's I think some of it is language and kind of what people are, kind of it's almost like fashion in a sense, like, because we've always said different, it's always had different iterations, right? Like Asian American, Asian Pacific American, Asian Pacific Islander American, Asian American and Pacific Islander, Asian American, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. And then in the academic settings, you see even more different iterations, right? Like Desi Americans and Amidas and Amemsas and Muslims, and so there's it's not so much, there isn't like a linear trajectory like we're all gonna get it right one day. It's I mean the language changes, so it changes in different directions, though, I would say.
I want to add that one of the reasons I understand for the name change has to do with the census. The census recognizes the Native Hawaiians have wanted to be separate and be recognized as a separate group from Pacific Islanders. They didn't like being lumped in, and when the census used to lump them in, they fought for that. Some of the there's a large population of Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders in this area, and I didn't realize it until I went to Wolf Trap to a Hawaiian program at Wolf Trap where they flew in performers from Hawaii. And then when I was at Social Security Administration at the Coast Guard, we had a program at the Coast Guard where we had some people from Hawaii perform and were there. And there were a lot of Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, Samoans, and different islands who came. It's a large population, and Native Hawaiians see themselves as distinct and want to be recognized. They're very proud and want to be recognized as distinct. And that's, I think the best way to think of why of this mindset is to think of like the various tribal nations of American Indians. They consider themselves separate countries. The Sioux are different from Apaches and so forth. So Native Hawaiians think of themselves as a unique group, and they think Pacific Islanders are a unique group. So they push for the census to identify that group as Native Hawaiians, and they succeeded. As a result, the Heritage Month program name changed, and that's been in the works for many years. But the Hawaii Society has members from Hawaii and various Pacific Island groups, islanders.
Oh, that's no, inclusion is definitely good for everybody. I want to change my trajectory for a little bit here, because with all the current news about AAPI hate, is there, and anyone can answer this, should there be programs, or should the district or the state of Maryland or federal agencies get involved with somehow using this month to stem the tide of all the hatred that's going on? Or is it better for the government to step back, like on the Monday rally that's coming this Memorial Day? Ben, what do you think?
Well, the answer is both. Well, what I mean by that, though, Jack, is I mean, on one hand, the idea of Heritage Month itself is, and I've been saying this, the whole month. We've never used the month just to, talk about the historical A-listers in the community, right? Like, we spend a lot of time talking about our historical firsts, the superstars in the community, the things about our heritage that we're proud of, and we should do that, right? But we also use it as a time to, remember our history. Michelle is familiar with the angst that the Filipino community goes over, because for October is Filipino American History Month, not Heritage Month, right? So there's a more intentional idea about looking at history as opposed to culture, but we also use Heritage Month to think about our history. We remember the internment camps. We remember that Filipino World War II veterans had their status as U.S. veterans taken away from them by the U.S. government after they came back from the war. And we remember it because we gave them a Congressional Gold Medal, right? In the same way that Chinese and American World War II veterans, we remember them because they just got their Congressional Gold Medal, but it was because they had to go through the Exclusion Act, right? And so we've always sort of looked at the good, the bad, and the ugly in terms of Heritage Month. So, it's no, they tried to get, the Asian American Foundation, right? The newest sort of community institution that just launched in, here. They just had an event in DC, actually, coinciding with the signing of the Anti-Asian Violence Hate Crimes Act, right? And so, a lot of things that have been planned for this month in this particular moment in history have been motivated by anti-Asian violence, right? They're like, oh shit, May's coming around, pardon my French. And it's an unfortunate opportunity to highlight the challenges that our community faces, but at the same time, it's given us a great spotlight that I think has lifted all boats, and I think we're going to look back, I think this year is really going to be looked at by historians, as a moment when the Asian American community, took the next step.
No, great. Christina, what do you think about the governor and what the state of Maryland, that's going on with all this AAPI hate? I mean, I know he's very good, but I don't know if I've actually heard what he thinks about all this. You're mute. Christina, you're muted.
Got it. Thank you. Sure. Actually, the governor, first lady, and I were up in Howard County in Ellicott City area. We have a very large Korean American population there, as well as Chinese American population. There were several businesses that were vandalized during the Lunar New Year's Eve, in fact. And so we were up there visiting those businesses and acknowledging and speaking with the people there who didn't feel safe. We went to the businesses, the restaurants and stores and things like that. The governor has put together he has appointed Robert Hur as the chair of the governor's anti-Asian hate working group. So this working group, we have been meeting and are working to put together information for the governor. So that's one of the things that the governor is doing to address the anti-Asian hate. I mean, his wife and his family, his daughters are all Asian Americans. So this is something that he feels very deeply about and is concerned about.
No, that's great. I want to revisit one thing with you, Christina, and that's I do know of Baltimore's Chinatown. In the 70s. I used to actually hang around there, like any Chinatown. Is it revivable? Is something like that revivable?
It's hard to say. I actually am a descendant of an immigrant who came to Baltimore in the late 1890s. So my grandfather and great-grandmother joined my great-grandfather in 1916 in Baltimore. So my family's been in Maryland for over 100 years. My grandfather's younger siblings and my father and the majority of his siblings were all born in Baltimore. So I do have some ties to Baltimore, and when I drive in Baltimore, I see the area where my great grandparents had businesses and things like that, stores, restaurants, and things like that. So it kind of hurts to see the condition of that part of the city as it is now. When I've grown up hearing stories and then visiting, going places, as a child. Is it revivable? I think it is potentially, not as, I wouldn't say as Chinatown, but there actually are, I know Filipino families that live in that area. So maybe not as Chinatown, but more of maybe an Asian Pacific American enclave.
Actually, that may be the wave of the future, because I look at Eden Center in Virginia, that's kind of a Asian enclave. And so actually for Chinatown and DC, that, it's funny, right? Because of the development, the Washington, DC, Chinatown has suffered a little bit, whereas maybe for Baltimore, it may revive it a little bit. Hard to say, right? It's hard to understand. So right. Jen, how are we doing on time?
We are good. We probably want to segue into audience Q&A, unless you had one more question, Jack, for the panel.
No, I would just like to give my thanks to the panel, because I know Christina may have to run soon, so I don't want to take up too much of her time. But we appreciate you coming today and actually giving us insight to the state of Maryland, since I live in Maryland now. But my heart's always in DC, man.
You're not the only one, sir.
And Regina, I think you mentioned, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to see if Evelyn is still on, Evelyn Moy, because I got an email from her about a big rally in DC on the 31st, just addressing the anti-Asian hate. And are you on, Evelyn?
Yes.
Can you talk about that,
Regina.
please?
Yes, on the 31st, there's going to be a national day of solidarity against anti-Asian hate. And that was created and organized by the Chinese American Heritage Foundation up in Boston, Wilson Lee and Esther Lee. And our DVM ambassador is Tom Fong. Tom was on Channel 5 and he's been on many media interviews, but we're going to meet at the National Mall between 9th and 7th Street, 7th and 9th Streets between 1 and 6 p.m. 1 to 4 is the gathering, and everyone's going to be making signs and just meeting. And then the rally starts between 4 and 6. And the keynote speaker is Lee Wong, who's a fellow veteran. So everybody pay attention to that. You can see it on Facebook. It's all over social media. So support this day, and we'll see you there. Thanks, Regina.
I will be reading
you.
I'll be reading a proclamation from the mayor there.
And I will be reading a letter from First Lady Yumi Hogan.
Nice. Christina, it's so good to see you at all these things now that everything's opening up.
I know, Ben.
It's like,
The
who
only
is
thing
she?
I
I've
miss is
missed
the
her for like
food.
a year. Yeah, that's true.
Thanks all for that announcement. I would invite everyone to place your questions in the chat. And also, if you just want to be called on, I'm happy to call on folks to ask their own questions. I actually had a first one for Regina. I mean, Regina, you grew up and your siblings grew up in the district for so long. Relative to Heritage Month, did it sort of resonate with you growing up? Like, was it something that really helped formulate or bring into consciousness Chinese American identity, or was it sort of other places or spaces or things happening at that time that were sort of more resonant in sort of your own sort of growing up?
Well, in terms of the Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month observance occurred in the even though it was in the 70s and then going on into 1980s and 1990s. In terms of awareness, it was actually the African American Civil Rights Movement that influenced me, and what they achieved, and that resulted in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the formation of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and EEO offices in federal agencies. So that civil disturbance that occurred after the shooting of Dr. King in 1976, I think it was, and the disturbances and what happened with the riots in DC and all that had an impact on me, and I think it also did affect Chinatown. It affected us because we saw ourselves as minorities within a minority, and it influenced us to recognize who we are, and it I think brought us together. And as a result of the African Americans growing strong together amongst their diverse group, the Chinese also in Chinatown open up to a lot of Asian Americans, and a lot of students from Maryland University used to come to Chinatown. And I was in Eastern Wind at that time. My brother and I were in Eastern Wind, and there were actually different organizations in Chinatown, but we were in Eastern Wind, which comprised of various ethnic groups of Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders. So it was an interesting time. It was a formation of identity and feeling proud of our heritage and recognizing that we are important, that we have to assert ourselves and say, we are here and we're here to stay and we're Americans. We're not, even though we may look different or we may come from somewhere else, we are here.
Thanks so much, Georgina. I actually wanted to bring in Betty Hawks about their experience and memories from the first APA Heritage Week. Just wondering if you wanted to say more, Betty. We could always come back to if your audio is not
She's
working.
don't say that she's shy, because she certainly is not.
It might be an audio thing right now, but let me know. Feel free to raise your hand and I can come back to you. Michelle. Oh,
Okay, you're off mute and you're off audio.
Hello.
Hi, Betty.
Hi, and I really apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt the program. And hi, Ben. Hi, Regina, whom I know. And hello, Christina and Jack. Yeah, excuse me. I was reminded that back in 1978, we had we had promotional ads for the first celebration on the mall. I am outside, and so that may be a problem for your audio, and I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yeah, it sounds great. Don't worry about it.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. No worries.
Well, Sonny Izan was the individual. He's a filmmaker, and he put together the ad. And this was radio, okay, before social media, etc. And I did the recording of it, which and why it resonates with me right now is the fact that what we were trying to do in a very short, like a minute and a half, ad, was convey the great diversity of Asian ethnic groups that comprise that large and, if you will, artificial category of Asian American. So in that span of time, I named as many Asian ethnic groups as I could, all right, and then gave the logistics for where one could find the celebration. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that there was a video too. My apologies. So the thing is, here we are, 40 plus years after 1978, and we have these instances of still many Americans not understanding that we are very distinct Asian ethnic groups. We are American, and what happens when there are conflicts, unfortunately, is that we get subsumed, like Vincent Chin in Detroit, after the dissolution of our American auto manufacturing industry. We get Japanese, mistaken for, we get South Asians mistaken for Muslims, etc. And it's a really sad commentary. I greatly appreciate the 40 plus decades of our attempt to help educate and expose Americans to the richness and diversity of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, who, as Regina said, were added to Heritage Week and month, some years later, since the beginning. But we still have so much to do, and I applaud the work that you are all doing, and out of Ben's office, to try to bring greater understanding, comprehension, and unity to us as all Americans. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Betty.
All right.
Great to have you here today.
Okay. All right.
I have a few more questions in the queue. Michelle, did you want to go ahead and ask her question?
Sorry.
Oh, I think Betty, you're still, Betty, if you wanted to mute your phone.
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know if mine was necessarily a question. I think it was more of just like, I think we were just talking about with the Native Hawaiians and the inclusion of that, in Heritage Month. We often don't think about that Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders are here in the district, right? Not just now, but historically, having, we've had Pacific Islanders and Native Hawaiians come into the district during really pivotal moments, right? And so for like the Queen, Liliuokalani, here, she came here to DC, to meet with the president and to fight for Hawaii's sovereignty, right? And that we don't think about those, those very pivotal historical moments for Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders who come to the district, which is also really kind of, really ironic, right? Because DC is a territory, right? And so there is a lot of alignment to the Pacific in terms of just even DC's treatment, in the federal government. So
Yeah.
just wanted to bring that up.
No, definitely, Michelle. I always tell the story. I first moved here to the district in the same year that my twin brother in the Navy was stationed in Guam. So our joke was always that we were both living in areas that didn't have a voting member of Congress, which is still true. But no, but especially my office has particularly used the DC statehood movement to talk about these issues about political representation. So folks from Guam come, they come here to DC and they still don't have a voting member of Congress, right? And so, or DC gets shafted in the CARES Act, relief for COVID-19 because we get treated like the territories. And so then that pits us against the territories, right? So, it allows us to talk about DC statehood as like a second-class citizenship. And unfortunately for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, whether it's because we know what it means to, to be kicked out of, to be not let into this country because we're from China, or, we're not citizens, so we are literally second-class citizens, or we're from the territories, it allows people to get a different sense of what it means for DC to not have full statehood.
And just the second classness, right? Like even just Filipinos who came under the US Navy, right? And served in the White House as stewards.
Oh, Filipinos were territories too?
And the Philippines was a territory too, right?
There's still Locals who think they should have been the 51st state.
Right. And so it's a very interesting just like tie to, we have to acknowledge, I think there's a former senator, or is it senator or Congressman Underwood from Guam.
Delegate, because he didn't have a vote in Congress.
Right. Delegate Underwood, often talks about how he was, here in DC in the beginning of Heritage Week and Heritage Month, right? And really fought for the P to be included in APA Heritage Month. So I just wanted to, that was earlier in the discussion when I typed that into the chat.
Thanks, Michelle. We have a couple more minutes left. So I was going to speak to Sojin's question. Who mentioned it's really interesting to hear about the relatively large size of DC's Office of APA Affairs as compared to other regions. Is it because DC is the nation's capital, and with consideration of the number of Asian Americans who came into town as part of the changing federal workforce? Or is it because of a particularly focused interest by local government in supporting local Asian American communities, or some combination thereof?
Well, so usually I just get to brag about us having the largest office in the country, and I get to leave it at that. So, and, you know, with, again, with appreciation for Christina's office, you know, Virginia just created an Asian Pacific American Legislative Caucus out of all of their Asian Americans who are in the legislature. You know, all the Asian Americans who are in Maryland's state legislature are coming together as well. So, so the secret that I don't tell anybody is that all of the jurisdictions are investing in our communities, right? Christina can tell you, you know, how Maryland is, you know, doing it. We just happened to use the formula of these constituency offices, and we do it through the lens of our community affairs office, right? So just because we get to slap a label on it, but you know, San Francisco, I was telling Sojin, San Francisco has an office of immigrant affairs, right? And so, but I also know that they do a lot of their constituency work with Asian and Pacific Islander communities through their Office of Community Relations and Services, right? So there may not be an Asian office, but you know, you go to San Francisco city government and they know, oh, get Jason. He's the guy who you talk to if you want to talk to the Asian Pacific Islander community. So people do it by hook or by crook, but you know, we're building the network of all the different agencies. So, you know, especially as the White House Initiative gets its new footing in DC in the new administration, now that Erika Moritsugu has a senior level position in the White House itself. So, you know, so we'll get to see, you know, how other cities do it, how other states do it. Yeah, but we're building that network too.
Great.
Maryland
Christina,
also
did you
has
have-
an Asian Pacific American legislative caucus with two senators, state senators that are Chinese American, by the way. But we also have delegates who are from who are Nepalese descent, Filipino descent, Korean, Indian. So there's diversity there as well. And I just want to mention that my office that houses the Governor's Commissions on Asian Pacific American Affairs and the Governor's Commission on South Asian American Affairs, we are just 2 of 7 ethnic commissions. And there's also within our office is the Interfaith Outreach and the Governor's Office of Service and Volunteerism and Volunteer Maryland.
Fantastic. Thank you all. It's 6:16 right now. As I mentioned, we're going to have a little mix and mingle afterwards, but Jack, did you want to do some closing remarks to send us off for the program?
No, once again, I was honored to be the moderator for these 3 panelists. I mean, a wealth of information, of history, and of just strong Asian Pacific heritage. So I thank you for speaking. I thank the Jen and Michelle for trusting me a little bit to do this, because a lot of times when I drive off road, but it was great. I thank everyone for, you know, coming to listen, and just really, you know, growing up in Chinatown, you know, all I really knew was the Chinese New Year celebration, you know, and, you know, for my kids, you know, that I hope, you know, especially with the current political atmosphere, that there are other Asians that mean something, that are valuable to the community, and that really we should be one as whole. So I thank everyone.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you all so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It was a great session. And as I say, we're going to formally wrap this formal panel discussion. Let folks exit if they need to head out, but we'll hold space for another 30 minutes for some time to hang out and say hello to everyone in the audience.
I'm going to have to leave, but I just want to say, United We Stand, come out and join us on Memorial Day in solidarity.
And
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you, everyone. You know, I know it's been a packed month So I hope that everyone who has been a professional Asian all month gets to relax on June 1st.
Because apparently we're still working on May 31st, Christina.
So yes,
Right.
so we got to, it's very Asian of us that we have to squeeze everything into the last, minute.
I'll see you guys there.
And I want to thank my brother for his pictures.
Thank you.
Those are
Those pictures are
incredible.
great, Regina.
I can show more pictures because we didn't get to see all of them, but
Okay, if it's a happy hour now, can I get my real drink now?
yeah, go for it.
Is this where you stop recording then, Jen, so that Ben can drink?
Well, it's already we've already.
It's just sparkling water. What are you talking about? But here's the photo reel that Regina and Harry put together is great.
Wow.
Mhm. Feel free to do commentary on top of it if you'd like.
Where is this taking place, this photo?
This photo is at Chinese Community Center, Mrs. Hayes at Calvary Baptist Church, and this is the English class.
Fabulous.
Teaching English to the newly arrived immigrants. And this is Easton Wynn painting the mural. It's probably in 1976, 75.
Yeah,
Around that
something
time
like that.
period. Yeah.
Yeah, like 1976. I
Do
think
you
that's
have
Leanne Ueda there.
Oh, is that the mural on the building now?
That's
Yeah.
right.
No, not now, but it was
I mean,
there in the
yeah.
70s.
Yeah.
This is the courtesy patrol patrolling past the mural. But that's one of the kids' project in the 1970s, courtesy patrol, which is like a junior police. They
Where was the mural?
On 7th and 8th Street. It was there something like 1976 to maybe 3 or 4 years. It was originally supposed to be what, 2 years, Harry? But
3
it ended-
years.
3 years, but it ended up being
It
there, what,
lasted around
5 years.
5 or 6.
Yeah.
It rotted, it fell apart.
Is this the wall that before they built all that stuff in Chinatown, when
Before
you came
the
out of the
subway.
metro? You
Yeah.
Before
took
the
up
subway,
brick
yes.
wall?
Right.
That's Jade
Yes.
Palace Wall.
That's it.
Jade Palace Wall.
There's some nice jackets people are wearing. I really enjoy.
Yeah.
I also want these t-shirts. Can we make these t-shirts again? The courtesy patrol t-shirts.
Great idea.
I love
I
them.
DC
love
Rec.
that idea.
That's from DC Rec. Yeah, that's these are the kids patrolling Chinatown. This is going past Calvary Baptist Church on 8th Street.
It'd be interesting to find if anyone still has the shirts.
I have a few of them.
You do?
You
Of course you
do?
Yeah,
So we can
Somewhere.
actually replicate them based on your shirts.
that was it
we have
doesn't
a
say
t-shirt.
Chinatown. It doesn't say Chinatown. It's a generic courtesy
That's
patrol
okay.
t-shirt.
Can we make it now aggressive patrol?
Crystal, put your camera on.
You know, we probably need to have that in large Asian American communities. We probably need to have something like
Right, this
a
picture here,
citizen patrol.
that's Penny right here to the left. Penny Lee.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God.
That's
Totally.
Penny.
The Courtesy
Okay.
Patrol was a citywide program.
I
It's
love
like
it.
junior police, you know, they just walk around and it's supposed to help prevent crime.
What's the center picture? I can't tell what it is. Do you remember?
I don't recall. I'm not sure. I have to look up in the manual. I have a
Okay.
courtesy patrol manual that has it on the cover. Right now, I don't remember what it is. I can't
It's
recall.
like it's a logo of some
You
sort.
remember, Jack? I don't remember. I have to look it up.
No, I don't remember the logo, but like I said, it was a citywide program, so I'm pretty sure it's probably generic to the DC area.
Yeah.
Mm. The jackets are great too. Also, I want a jacket. Also,
There was a fire at this upholstery fabric shop, and we went take a look at it, write a report. That's what we did. You know, we usually write a report.
It was in Chinatown.
If there was a
That's
crime
7th
that's happening in
Street?
Chinatown, if there's a crime happening in Chinatown, we report it to the nearest authority. We can't intervene. So,
Mm. Mm.
and this is the Creative Workshop newsletter. This is one of the projects they did to help them learn English. And they write about their experience in the Creative Workshop through this newsletter.
Nice.
And, you,
Nice you.
and this
Yep,
one is
that's a
at
young Harry.
yeah, that's at me at Pace College at the Asian American conference in New York City. I think it's around 1972, if I'm not mistaken. But this
Hey,
is at
Harry.
Pace College.
Hey, is this did you see at the time she went by Joanne Miyamoto and Chrissy Jima perform at that conference?
Yes.
Because I think that's after I think that was like when they met. Charlie Chin was at that conference.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. This is Ms. Hayes from the Chinese Community Center at a anti-war march in DC.
Do you know what's in the backdrop where that's located?
That's
I'm not
Thomas
sure. Somewhere
Circle.
on Constitution
looks like-
Avenue.
Yeah, that's where where 11th Street is that not 11th?
14th.
14th.
Yes, probably around there.
It's that church right at the corner of the circle.
Yep.
On the north end.
Yeah.
That'd be cool to place this photo to where it is.
Get a
now.
bunch of people and like recreate
Recreate. Yeah, that would
Yes.
be awesome.
it.
And just put the DC flag. The good flag.
What flag is that actually?
Yeah.
That looks,
It looks like one of the original black ones of the colors. 'Cause the
Yeah.
black and white photo is hard to tell. But I just want to mention, too bad Tony Sarmiento's not on, but I think the young lady in the very back, not the back, but behind this forefront guy, that's Debbie Lee, I think. That looks like her, who was one of the people who started.
it
with
does, yeah.
iOS.
oh, that's the woman
Yeah.
who stopped you in the street and asked you about your identity.
Yes, I think that's
It
her.
looks like Debbie, but I'm not quite sure, but it does look like her.
It looks like her to me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I lost my picture of her. I can't find it, but that's.
I
who
have
started
one.
it all.
I have one picture of her.
Okay.
Michelle, you've talked to Tony, haven't you?
Yeah, he's on a flight right now. He wanted to join. But yeah, no. It would be cool to find out who this little girl is too.
I know.
I don't know.
She's
I
like
really-
our age now.
I think
That's Mrs. Hayes' daughter, the young ones. I believe it's the youngest one.
Oh,
Jenny.
Jenny.
Jenny,
no, that's
Jenny,
not her.
Jenny,
That's
yeah.
not her.
It's
That's
not her?
It's not
I
her?
believe that's what I understand. I'm trying to recall, but I think it was she told me that it was a young lady that was, I think it was that, I'm not sure it was with that muscular guy there, that came up to her and grabbed her hand to walk with, you know. It might be his kid or the lady next to Mrs. Hayes. It might be her kid, but they sort of walked together and she walked up to her and grabbed her hand.
Cute.
Cute.
Next one.
This was at a Chinese restaurant in Tacoma Park, Maryland. And one of the things that the Creative Workshop kids did was learn Chinese folk dancing. And they put a demonstration on at this restaurant.
Cute.
It's a fan dance, as you can tell. And this is at Thompson Elementary School in DC. Another performance. And one of the Creative Workshop, they have also sewing classes and they learn how to sew. Make clothes. And I think they made some of their costumes. This is the East and Wind Chinese American Summer Festival. This is Charlie Chin performing at the festival.
Oh, no, great.
That's Charlie Chin right there. And you can see the crowd. We had a good crowd there.
And this is on H Street?
Yes,
Yeah.
H Street, 6 and H.
So which way are we looking towards?
We're looking towards 7th Street.
7th Street.
Okay.
Hey, is that ton up front on the stage, at the edge of the stage?
No, that's not Tom.
It's not ton, it looks like ton.
No, that's not him.
Oh, okay.
This is Mrs. Hayes, Chinese Cultural Center Senior Lunch Program. She had a senior exercise program also, and they had a senior women's club.
Where are they? Do you know what building they're in?
I'm not sure. They sometimes have their luncheons at the embassy, Chinese embassy.
Mm.
And I'm not sure. And she had an antique store. I'm not sure if this is part of it, but it looked like it might be a Calvary Baptist church, but I'm not sure. Because she had a lot of programs at Calvary Baptist Church. Chinatown Creative Workshops, Arts and Craft. They're doing paper mache in this picture. I'm not sure what they were building. Do you remember, Jack? Oh, Jack's gone.
No, I don't remember what they're building.
They look like they're making a bowl or something because it's round.
Oh,
Paper mache, something bowl. I'm not sure.
okay. That makes sense.
And this is Ron Goon. He's helping one of the kids with their homework, and they have to do their homework before they do any of the workshop activities. Curtis Patrol Group patrolling I Street. They're patrolling set 6 and I. That's the 6 and I Street, yeah.
And Harry, you were saying this was a citywide program where
Yes, Curtis Patrol was citywide.
do patrols in different communities?
Yes. They had a Latin in Adams Morgan area, they had a Latin Curtis Patrol. And this is Miss Hayes. I think this is one of the first rap sessions we were invited to. And I took a picture of this rap session. I think this is the first one.
You were doing rap back then?
Not that type of rap.
Harry, is that Mrs. Hayes in the polka dot?
Yes, that's her.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a young Mrs. Hayes.
That's Henry Wong, a friend of mine, in the back of her. And to the right of her, 2 persons down, is her daughter, not Priscilla, Patty Hayes.
Patty.
Yeah. And this is
Miss
Steve Lee
Franklin
at the
Chow.
far left.
Yes, Steve on
Lee
the
at the
far left.
Yeah.
And Franklin Chow was there on the right in a jacket.
I don't think he was there at this time. I'm not sure.
That looks like him.
This is the guy from the church here on the far right.
Oh, okay.
But he was in some of the rap sessions, but I'm not sure if it was this one. And I think that might be her son Phil onto the her right.
No, he looks like somebody
No.
from the Chinese
No.
church.
No.
Yeah.
Ricky, is his
No.
name Ricky?
I'm
You
not sure.
recognize him, Jenny? That looks like Rick. Is his name Ricky?
No, it looks like Lindy Leo Jr.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure.
Looks like Junior.
Well, this guy go ahead. The guy to the next to Steve Lee, he's from the church. I've seen him before at the church.
Oh, that's
Yes,
Lindy. Lindy's son. Lindy's senior son, Junior.
Okay, Linda Leo.
hmm
Yeah.
Next picture.
And this is Mrs. Hayes. They have the 4-H club. So you can see she was very active. But I got to tell you, the first active group in Chinatown before Mrs. Hayes, Eastern Wind and the others, was the Chinese Community Church. They had programs, dealing with legal problems with immigrants and translations and whatnot. So yeah, they were active. So I got to give a shout to them.
Better.
Okay.
Thanks so much for the photos. Those are great.
You're welcome.
It's like hundreds more where that came from. So
Yeah, I got quite a few hundred, 300 more. Actually, I have 800.
oh my gosh.
Hey, Jen,
Some of them are repetitive.
I
Sorry?
have a doctor's appointment, so I have to leave. So bye,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Jack.
Jack.
Okay, so
Yeah.
good.
Great
Well
job.
done, Jack.
Thank you,
Take
Jack.
care.
I got to show you a picture of us at the church.
Oh,
See that? That's Ton right there.
yeah, it's done.
Ton right there. And that's over here it's
I
Benny
see
Moy.
Hiwa.
Give me Moy.
And I'm right here in the middle. And that's my brother Vernon. And I forgot who this guy is.
Wing?
Oh, it's Wing. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
Wing.
Wing.
Yeah.
Wing.
And that's Ton. And I forgot these two guys. I can't remember them.
Let me look.
But John Lee, our teacher, took this picture.
Oh yeah, John was a great guy.
Yeah, this is his class. We were in his class. He took a picture of us in front of the church.
What was Wayne's last name?
Wing Wu.
Wing Wu.
Okay.
That's right. Wing Wu. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, his brother was Hong and Lam, and they were still pretty much involved with the church until they're married and raised kids.
Oh, and Benny Moy's kid, that's our dentist. He's our dentist now.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Matthew Moy.
Matt.
Yeah. Oh, and here's a clear picture of that logo, Courtesy Patrol. It looks like a book. It looks like an unfolding book of knowledge with a tree and people in it. If you look closely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's one of the Courtesy Patrol logo. Yeah.
Okay,
Nice.
thank you.
I think it's
It's going to be too
rainbow and
peaceful if we're
learning.
changing it to aggressive patrol.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to run. It's great talking to everyone. Thank you so
Thank-
much.
Thanks,
Thank you
James.
so much, Jennings. Good to see you.
Everyone on Monday, maybe. Whoever shows up, be there. Bye.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We can also wrap up too. I can also give you all back your evening. It is 6:37 and it's time for dinner too. So this was great to be able. Thank you all so much for this session. It was super fun. Thank you, Regina, Ben,
welcome.
Perry.
No,
Thank
this
you,
is-
Michelle, for the theme this month.
And we'll hopefully we'll definitely have something next month. We'll let people know what that one.
Yeah, we're definitely.
Crystal.
It'll likely be kind of a merge of our virtual happy hour and talk story to do a church event. So the American University students worked with Shirley and Walter over the past few months to build a profile for the community church. So we're excited to be able to do that event too, and hopefully more programs this summer. So
Yay.
keep you all posted. Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you all so much.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Thanks,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.